morning guys, this is Vijay, biology lecturer from AhleBait Junior College. So today we are going to discuss a quick review about NEET Biology Unit 1 Living World. Okay. So far we have discussed this particular unit with different videos. Each and every content in this particular chapter we have discussed in detail, and also we have discussed the most important points from this particular point. Now let us go for a quick review about this particular unit 1 living world, okay, which includes these are the different categories, these are the major points. Let us see one by one like what we are going to discuss now. So first we are going to discuss about the topic, that is properties of living organism. Yes, so properties of living organism. Properties are nothing but these are the essential characteristic features of a living organism that could be able to distinguish from a non-living organism. Okay, let us see what are these properties of living organism. Here are few examples. I have mentioned growth or development, then reproduction, then metabolism, then heritability, then lifespan, duration of life, then self-consciousness. So like few examples I have mentioned here, but there are many living properties for the living organisms. Okay, so growth, which includes like increasing in number of mass of a living organism, and this may further divided into two major categories: intrinsic growth and extrinsic growth. So based on that, the organism could able to show their development, growth and development. This includes the cell division. When we are talking about the cell division, leads for the formation of group of cells, or that leads to the formation of tissue. So that tissues will form the organ and organ system, then it could able to give a whole organism. Okay, that is about the growth. And when we are talking about this cell division, there are two types of cell division we are discussing. Like one is said to be mitosis cell division, the other one is meiosis cell division. Okay, so when we are talking about this mitosis cell division, again these cell division happens in the somatic cell. Somatic cells are nothing but body cells. This could able to happen, and here the cells are identically similar. As the mother cell how looks like, the daughter cells will be formed, and here mostly we can get haploid or diploid type of cells, and when we are talking about the chromosomes category. Okay, so likewise meiosis is the another one more type of cell division that could able to see only in the reproductive cells. So there are two major reproductive cells like spermatozoa and ovum. Male reproductive cell and female reproductive cell. So there we could able to see this meiosis kind of cell division. And here the mother cell, the combination of these two gametes, male gamete and female gamete, that could able to produce the zygote, then further undergoing for this meiosis cell division, then that it could able to form four different daughter cells. And here the daughter cells and the mother cells are identically dissimilar, not similar. So that is about this cell division when we are talking about under this category. Okay, likewise reproduction, one of the other category where we are discussing about how do the organisms maintain their generation, and also it could able to pass phylogenetic characteristic features from one generation to the other generation. So these all could be possible by the process, the properties of the living organism, that is called reproduction. Again, this reproduction, when we are talking about in the living organism, there are many types, many categories of this reproduction. Sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction, vegetative propagation, when we are talking about where the sexual reproduction, this could be seen in unicellular organism and multicellular organism. This type of reproduction could able to see where the two different gametes which are combined together to form undergo for this kind of sexual reproduction. Two different cells will involve, the male gametes and the female gametes. So based on that organism, this could be named into different terms. Spermatozoa, ovum, and antheridia and gonidia, like different names can be used for this. When we are talking about this asexual mode of reproduction, there a single cell which involves for dividing, or it undergoes for pieces, fragmentation, that could able to form this asexual mode of reproduction. And when we are talking about this particular reproduction in plants like organism, we are using the term vegetative propagation. Any one part of the plant that could be able to form into a new generation, or the new life, or new organism that could able to form, like vegetative propagation under the category. So this also one of the major properties of the living organism when we are talking about. Okay. Then the metabolism is nothing but it is a total sum of biochemical activities that could able to happen in the living cells, and these are further divided into two different categories, anabolism and catabolism, and these anabolism, in a common term, we are constructive and destructive process and formation of macromolecules, or the breakdown of biomacromolecules. Okay, when we are talking about these biomacromolecules, again there are two categories like we are discussing, microbiomolecules and macrobiomolecules. Like there are two different categories, like they belongs to like carbohydrate, proteins, then lipids, these all like the polymers when we are talking about. Then irritability is one of the property of the living organism. This is nothing but how good the organism could respond to the external stimuli. So when we are talking about the response of an organism, they undergo for stimuli. There are two different stimuli we are discussing, like external stimuli and internal stimuli. So how far this organism could able to responding according to the external stimuli from the environment or the nature, that is about this irritability. Like in plants we can discuss our micro level organisms. Okay, so like why is this lifespan, the life cycle of the entire organism is also one of the common properties of the living organism. And also this self consciousness, it's one of the major property that could able to see only in the human being. So human being is the only social animal could have this self consciousness is when we are talking about. And other than this, the few other properties of living organisms like excretion, digestion, mode of nutrition intake. So these also a kind of property, like when we are talking about for the living organism especially. Mode of nutrition, it may vary according to the organism, like unicellular organism and higher level organism. And in unicellular organism, different kind of mode of nutrition could be seen. And a higher level organism again. Suppose when we are talking about this mode of nutrition, we are going to divide into self mode of nutrition and the heterotypic mode of nutrition, and also a saprophytic mode of nutrition, like we could able to divide into different categories. Okay, the self mode of nutrition is also called as photoautotropic, this chemoautotropic. So where we are talking about the organism depending for the sunlight as a source for preparation of this nutrition. And when we are talking about this chemoautotropism, there the organism depending for organic substances, chemical substances. Okay, so that is about the mode of nutrition. And when we are talking about this heterotypic mode of nutrition, again there are different categories, carnivores, omnivores, like depending for plants, depending for flesh animals, or depending for both, like different categories of mode of nutrition. Then unicellular organisms like amoeba, paramecium, there we could able to see the mode of nutrition is like engulfing, utilization of its different structure, that is called pseudopodia. With the help of the pseudopodia, it could be able to engulf the minute particles, like. So that is about the nutrition. And one more category, like the saprophytic mode of nutrition. Saprophytic mode of nutrition can be seen like in certain bread mold. These fungus categories, they depends for the other dead and debris for their mode of nutrition. So there are many categories when we are discussing about the mode of nutrition. This all belongs to what? The properties of the living organism, in the wholesome, right? So that is about these properties of the living organism in detail. So when we are going to talk about next category, like building blocks of the life. So here are few building blocks of the life I have mentioned, like oxygen, water, and sodium chloride, then biomolecules. So these are said to be the building blocks of the living organism. So how it is explained as, how good it is described as the building blocks of the living organism. So these are the major or the essential factors for the living organism. One organism could be able to survive. So these are the factors which are very, very important. So like oxygen, H2O, water. So these factors are very, very important. Like this oxygen, that is helping for the oxidation of food and also the respiration, which is involving for the respiration, cellular level respiration, tissue level respiration, and organ level respiration. So that is about this oxygen. When we are talking about this H2O, water, the entire body, of a living organism, around 70 to 90% in between, the organisms are filled with water. Especially the entire cell of the living organism, which is made up of cytoplasm. Most of the cytoplasm components are water. So this water involving for many kind of biochemical activities, like this metabolism, that could help for the regulation of metabolism and regulation of body temperature, regulation of pH level in the living organism. So these all are like uses or the advantages for these factors, the building blocks of the life. Like and the sodium chloride, these salt also balancing body temperature, maintaining the regulation of the metabolism, metabolic rate, so which is involving for. So like this is also said to be the building blocks of the living organism. Okay. Likewise, biomolecules. So when we are talking about these organic biomolecules, say for example like some biomolecules which are helping for the plants for in different ways, like carbohydrates, then protein, then so these all are said to be the polymers which are made up of the small monomers like carbohydrates, which are simply said to be sugar components, we would call it as. Like when we are talking about this protein, so which are made up of the simple components like amino acids, like vice lipid, so which are made up of small substances like glycerol. So these all are the few examples for these biomolecules. Okay, how far these biomolecules helping for the living organism? So they could able to help in a different way, that could able to generate energy, that could able to form as a nutritive value for the living organism, and the formation of cell wall, cell membrane, and the different layers around the cell organelles, nuclear membrane. So that all could be comprised by this biomolecule. And also like in certain animals, the formation of chitin, the outer layer, the egg membrane, egg cell. So these all are made up of these biomolecules. These could able to give in a 3 different form of energy, like nutritive value when we are talking about, and also we are talking about this organism could able to generate energy, giving energy to the living organism to perform their life activities. So this is the category when we are talking about the building blocks of life. When we are going to talk about the other category, like the few more characteristic features for the living organism, like homeostasis, adaptation. Then when we are going to talk about this osmoregulation. Okay. So based on this, the maintenance of body temperature, how good the organism maintaining its body temperature. So all these are also few more properties we can able to see in the living organism. Okay. So like, the based on the maintenance of body temperature, the organism could able to divide into two categories, like homeothermic and poikilothermic, cold-blooded animals and warm-blooded animals. So these also a new term we are learning from this category, like how the organisms could able to adjust its body temperature according to the surrounding or the environment temperature. That is one category. The other category is like the how good the organism could able to maintain unable to maintain the body temperature according to the surrounding temperature, surrounding environment. So likewise we are dividing these categories. So when we are talking about this adaptation, any living organism that could adapt themselves according to the external climatic conditions, so that is considered to be the adaptation. So based on that, the organism could able to adapt themselves, and also they develop their own body characteristic features, physical characteristic features, like aquatic organisms, their limbs are modified into flappers. So that is one of the example, like you can see in the penguin, seal, walrus, such type of organisms. So the organism could able to modify their body features according to this adaptation, the category of adaptation they could able to survive. Like a camel, that could form the hump, at the back of its body, then that could able to store plenty of water, though it is surviving in this kind of adaptation, desert. So these all are few examples when we are talking about this adaptation. And these adaptation, when we are discussing, we should also know about the ecosystem. There are different kind of ecosystem we are going to discuss about, like land ecosystem or a terrestrial ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, like we are talking about. Again, this land ecosystem or the terrestrial ecosystem further classified into many categories, like desert ecosystem, forest ecosystem. Again, in the forest ecosystem, many categories: deciduous forest ecosystem, coniferous forest ecosystem, green forest ecosystem, like many different categories we are going to discuss. So according to that particular forest ecosystem, the organism could able to form their body adaptation. The features are could be changed, physical features are could be changed according to its environment or environmental condition, like ecosystem. Like when we are talking about this aquatic ecosystem, it could be divided into two categories, like marine water ecosystem, freshwater ecosystem, salt ecosystem or freshwater ecosystem. And again, this when we are talking about this freshwater ecosystem, there are many categories, like pond ecosystem, lake, stream, estuary is one of the ecosystem where. So this is about the different ecosystem level, how the organism could able to survive according to the environmental changes. Okay, when we are talking about this biodiversity, okay, so biodiversity, it's a category how far the organisms are, the wide range of organisms which are dispersed or scattered around the globe, that is about this biodiversity. There so far 1.7 to 1.8 million species that could able to seen in and again in this 0.5 millions which are considered to be the plant species, and rest of them like the animal and other species. So these, when we are talking about this biodiversity, then the biodiversity topic leads for this further category subtopic, like identification of organism and nomenclature, naming of an organism, then classification, taxonomy and systematics. Okay, so when we are talking about this nomenclature is one of the very very important category. So based on that, one could able to identify the organism, how far it is surviving, how far the organism could be seen, and the further studies about the particular species, this biological nomenclature could able to help us. Okay, and these biological nomenclatures are again there are many categories we have discussed: binomial nomenclature, naming of an organism with two different terms, like genus, and other one is species, or a specific epithet, like trinomial nomenclature, naming of an organism with genus, species and subspecies. So that is one of the example, like, and this entire category, when we are talking about the systematics, the taxonomy, binomial nomenclature, so these credits goes to Carolus Linnaeus, okay, one who did a lot of effort for making the universal law of binomial nomenclature. So that could help us to study about a particular species in detail, in depth, and that could be able to help. Next, when we are talking about this taxonomic categories, so the taxonomic categories are helping us to identify the particular organism belongs to which category. Okay, so there are 7 obligate categories we have discussed, like kingdom, division are also said to be phylum, then class, order, family, genus and species, like. So these goes in a descending order of hierarchy, and as we are talking about the species, genus, family, order, class, division or phylum then leads to kingdom, that is said to be ascending order of hierarchy. Okay, so here again we are discussing about different levels of species with different categories, so different levels of organism that could be discussed under different categories, like species. A particular species, when we are talking about, comprises into genus, then that comprises a family, that leads to order, class. Division, we are using the term when we are talking about this particularly plants, and the phylum is a category we are discussing about animal, that leads to the kingdom. There are, see, when we are talking about this kingdom, we should also remember that classification of different organisms. This classification have ever started from Aristotle period, that is said to be dinomial or binomial classification. Dinomial or binomial, that leads for the entire living organisms are classified under 2 different categories, plants and animals, plantae, animalia. Then that leads to the trinomial nomenclature and the trinomial classification. So trinomial classification, that credit goes to Haeckel, Ernst Haeckel. That leads to the tetranomial classification or 4 kingdom classification. That leads to the Whittaker, who could able to form the 5 kingdom classification. Monera, Protista, fungi, algae, Monera, Protista, fungi, and these other 2 categories, plants and animalia, like. So that leads for this 5 kingdom classification by Whittaker. So this is about the different categories of classification of living organism. Then when we are going to talk about this taxonomic aid, so taxonomic aids, these are aids which help us to study in detail about a particular species, a plant species, an animal species. So these categories will help us to study about the particular species of an organism, and also its phylogenetic triads, its genetic variations and phylogenetic evolution. So that all we could able to study in detail. So these are the few examples, like herbarium, museum, zoo, botanical garden and key. So these are the different categories of these taxonomical aids. Now herbarium, when we are talking about the dry plant species which are compressed on a sheet, particular herbarium that could help us to study about how far it is compressed on a sheet. Then we are discussing about that herbarium in detail. Then when talking about museum, so this is the place where mostly this museum could be seen in a large institution and universities. So there we could able to study about the different plant species or animal species, and here particularly we could able to see the animal species in a stuffed form, not just as a photographic form. Then zoo and this botanical garden, so it's like lively lively experience there, the living species which are grown in a natural form under a protected area, a particular area. So there we are discussing about this, the different species. Then when we are talking about this, key is one of the device that could help us to identify one particular living organism and its features in detail, you know. So that is about the taxonomic aids when we are talking about. And next one is about, so these are the few examples for the certain famous book. So these books are and the author of these books are very important when we are talking about, you know, Origin of Life, Oparin, so who could able to give, then Systemae Naturae, Genus Plantarum, Species Plantarum. So these all are books, are the volumes which is mentioned in detail about the description of different species of plants, different species of animals in detail. So that is that credit could able to go for Carlos Linnaeus. Then like that is about the different famous books which we are discussing. And likewise when we are talking about the different branches of science and the different branches of science and certain scientific personalities, how far they are related with the specific branches of science in detail. Now fathers of biosciences we have discussed in detail. So this is about the quick review about the Unit 1 Living World in detail. Thank you, children.